Good morning. Welcome to the August 2026 edition of Cattle Trails Showcase. I'm Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate. Glad to be your host. The purpose of the Cattle Trails Showcase is to continually highlight the communities, historical elements, museums, and other attractions along the historic cattle trails. And Lonnie Steben is our showcase chair. Cattle Trails Showcase was initiated 4 years ago by the International Chisholm Trail Association, represented today by Dennis Katzenmeyer, Nancy Lawrence, Mary Lou Rivers Fry. Um, Today, the Cattle Trails Showcase is a project of the Historic Cattle Trails Consortium, which seeks to promote all of the historic cattle trails: the Chisholm Trail, the Western Trail, also known as Great Western, the Shawnee Trail, and the Goodnight Loving Trails. We are excited about upcoming events in fall 2026. Soon it will be the second annual National Cattle Trails Conference, and this one will be in Sedalia, Missouri. Now, fans of the TV show Rawhide will remember that Sedalia, Missouri was the destination. Those cowboys were trying to get the cattle to the end of the trail at Sedalia. And so we'll be again heading to Sedalia for the second annual National Cattle Trails Conference. There are lots of attractions in Sedalia, rich history. We've asked Doug Kiburz to tell us about them. So, Doug, please, the floor is yours.
Keep rolling, 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 though the streams are swollen. Keep them doggies rolling, ride through rain and wind and weather. Hell band for leather, wishing your gal was by your side. All these things you're missing, good grub, love, and kissing, waiting at the end of your ride. Move 'em on, head 'em up, move 'em on, head 'em up, ride. Cut 'em in, ride 'em out, ride 'em in, cut 'em out, cut 'em out. Ride 'em in, ride. Well, I don't have my bullwhip, but I do have a Louisville Slugger bat. So thanks for joining today. We appreciate that opportunity. It's always good to start at the beginning. 1493, Columbus made his second voyage to the west, and he brought porcine, equine, and bovine stock with him, which of course changed the whole history of the Western Hemisphere. All these Spanish cattle, through natural selection, hundreds of years roaming around the Southwest, well, they became drought resistant, disease resistant, mobile. They calved with ease. You could broke them to drive and pull a wagon. They were colorful like a paint horse. You could use their hide. They were edible. You could use their tallow to make soap and candles. They were an essential critter for the times. And that's how we got to this point. Sedalia, Missouri, established 1860. It has a lot of hats. We were called the Queen City of the Prairie with settlers coming through. Of course, 1866, the first cattle drive. After the Civil War, it came up and to the end of the railroad, which was Missouri Pacific at the time. The first black college, or one of the first, was in Sedalia. Scott Joplin came up from Texarkana, go to college, pounded out a syncopated rhythm down at the Maple Leaf Saloon, and we became the cradle of ragtime music. At the turn of the century, that would be two turn of the centuries ago, the state fair came to town. Shortly after that, the Wright brothers flew over the top of the fair. Because the Missouri Pacific and MKT Rail had their repair stations here, more railroad cars were repaired here than most any place west of Mississippi. So UP called us Train Town, USA. Became Tree City, USA with our encouragement of tree planting and reinventing ourselves once again. We are the second city in the state of Missouri to be a Monarch City, USA because of planted byway. So it's fun to live in a town that reinvents itself and has a certain amount of history. Now, these are all very characteristic and good things, but in St. Louis, they called us the Sodom and Gomorrah of the Midwest. With all these cowboys and railroad men, we had over 100 houses of negotiated affection. At one point in a period of time, there were some 500 prostitutes registered as their prime form of business. One in particular on Main Street was known for people that wrote poems on the walls, and they wrote their name. They wrote reviews of both the workers and the other folks here. One of them was Buffalo Bill. So I looked back up, and sure enough, his Wild West show came to town right about then. So I think that's a pretty authentic piece of history. What you'll see on the trails in Plaza, the Starline Brass Trails in Plaza, it's a tribute to the Southwest, to the Western expansion, the railroad, the cattle and the cowboys coming in, and also the settlers that came to make a better life for themselves and their future generations. Turns out we're those future generations. It's really a project that goes coast to coast. The steam locomotive came out of New Jersey. The tender is made out of original Missouri parts out of Kansas. The cattle car came out of the Denver Rio Grande line, and the drover's caboose, one of the very few left, came out of the Frisco Railroad Museum. There's an audio tour that came out of San Francisco, so it's really kind of a coast-to-coast project that we had. The statues were made Adonis bronze in Salt Lake City, and J. Michael Wilson was the sculptor for those. So that's really the scene you'll see. I tell people this is what you'd see back in the 1860s if you come into Sedalia. And we have a lot of other historic things. We're going to see the Katy Depot on our tour, the Daum Museum of Art. That's where the Western Art Show is going to be. The MKT, the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad, was the first railroad into North Texas, and it is now the longest rail-to-trail conversion, and it is part of the American Discovery Trail. And so you can get on the trail right here and go to either coast. Right now, those of us on the American Discovery Trail Society, we have a Declaration of Independence copy going from the West Coast, leaving in July, arriving in Delaware at Thanksgiving, going hand to hand, state to state. It'll be here on the 27th of September, going all the way across the country to 325 different communities. The State Fair has a historic architecture. It's right across the street from where we'll be at the college. The Scott Joplin Festival, a world-class festival every year. The Bothwell Hotel out on the outskirts of town. Andrew Carnegie gave away all of his money. He built 2,500 libraries all over the world. One of the first ones west of Mississippi was here. That's the Andrew Carnegie Library. It's got an entire wing of large print books, so that's one of my favorite places to go. I also have the second oldest symphony west of Mississippi. There you'll see a picture of the Sons of the Pioneers playing with our symphony. I think they've been here 3 different times, and it's always been very popular. If you're coming this way, if you're coming from the east, of course, St. Louis has a lot of attractions. Up in Hannibal, there's Mark Twain. We talked a little bit about it right before we started, but Warm Springs Ranch is about 50 minutes from Sedalia. It is the breeding farm for the Budweiser Clydesdale. Any given time, they have about 40 head of different age, and that's really a pretty fantastic tour. Coming from the north, Omaha has some attractions. There's a Lewis and Clark Museum at Nebraska City, Pony Express up at St. Joe. Coming from the south, you got Branson, Bass Pro, Silver Dollar City. Coming toward Kansas City, they've got Union Station, the World War I Museum, which is really a fantastic museum if you haven't seen it. Harry Truman's Library, Independence, and other attractions on the way. So poke around a little bit. There's some fun things to do on the way here. The 6,000-seat arena opened last night at the Missouri State Fair. The opening, of course, they had the Budweiser Clydesdales there, which is always impressive. Many cities claim to be the gateway to the West, as does St. Louis, with good reason. But I think as Missouri, we can be claimed as the state that is the gateway to the West. And I'll kind of make my case. Lewis and Clark, sent by Thomas Jefferson, Meriwether Lewis, William Clark, and the Corps of Discovery, 2.5 to 3 years, going 8,000 miles, leaving from St. Charles, Missouri, to find a route to the West. Now, in 1806, they came back. 1821, Missouri was a state. So we went from unknown Indian territory to statehood in 15 years. You can imagine the dynamics and the evolution of the westward expansion at that point. The Trail of Tears came through Missouri. It actually went through 9 different states. And it had the Relocation Act of, I think that was 1830, about 1/4 of the different tribes, the Choctaw, Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, you hear a lot about the different tribes. About 1/3 to 1/4 of them didn't make the trip because of disease, exposure, starvation. Missouri has 3 memorials to the Trail of Tears coming through. If you were on the riverboat, Mark Twain, of course, was up in Hannibal. He was a pilot on both the Missouri and the Mississippi. The Mississippi is where he did his main piloting and started his career. A lot of the times the river was the main way to get people west. The Ohio, the Mississippi, and the Ohio River, Mississippi, and Missouri River. The first riverboat came up the Missouri in 1817. A lot of the people got to St. Louis on the riverboat. Then Daniel Boone and Sons were commissioned to take people west. Now, if you get over to Franklin, that was the official start of the Santa Fe Trail. But if you get there, you can also pick up the Shawnee Trail going south. Now, of course, Sedalia was the Queen City of the Prairie. The first cattle drive came up that direction. If you wanted to keep going west, you go to Independence, you get on the Santa Fe Trail, the Oregon Trail, the California Trail, and the Oregon, 2,100 miles on that, the Santa Fe, 900 miles until the Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe Railroad got there. California Trail, 2,000 miles, took you 3 to 6 months to get down that way. So going west by wagon train, that was a way to go. Of course, it took about 4 to 6 months to get there. Or you could get on the Butterfield Overland Stagecoach route, but ran from about 1858 to the Civil War, 2,800 miles, 25 days, 150 stops, going consistently. So you could cut that 6 months down to 25 days on a pretty rough ride that went through Missouri, down to Texas, all the way out to California. And to show how important the railroad was, when the railroad went through, you could do that trip in 90 hours. So the dynamics of the transportation across there. That was the Butterfield Overland Stagecoach route. There's some stops that are still around here. So if I think about all the things that went westward, Missouri was kind of right in the center of a lot of those. Shawnee Trail, of course, you think about and you say, well, it was a pretty short-lived trail because the railroad moved on. They had the quarantine from Texas fever. But really, it had a pretty long life. The Indians used the Shawnee Trail for raiding and for hunting back in the early 1800s. Then you had the Mexican-American War. Soldiers went the other way. When both Mexico and then later the Republic of Texas, they had land grants for people to come south. At one point, there were 1,000 wagons going south to pick up the land grants. Now, though I figure land grant might have been in the big print, in the small print was probably the fact that they wanted to build a buffer for the Comanche Indians that were raiding that side, and they were pretty ruthless. They were trying to build a buffer across there. They might not have told them that in their wagons on the way downtown. So then 1840s, the cattle drive started going north. Oliver Loving and his son took a couple of herds up the Shawnee Trail, and they cut over towards St. Louis and Illinois. So really, the cattle trailing on the Shawnee has been going on quite some time. And of all the trails, I think it had more north-south traffic between the Indians, the Mexican-American War, in both directions. So that's the end. We are one end of it. But just like the cattle didn't come from one place, they came from a fairly large area. And the Shawnee Trail had an east division, a west division, went different places, depending on a variety of factors. So if you're coming, we have one of the longest runways. You can fly your private jet in. You can get on the Katy Trail. You can ride your horse. You can walk. You can ride your bicycle. Amtrak comes through here. You can jump in your favorite jalopy or car, and you can drive here. And our location is more about a little over an hour from Kansas City, about a little over 3 hours from St. Louis. Highway 50 goes through, 65 goes north and south. We're about half hour south of the Interstate 70 going through. And so we hope to welcome you to beautiful downtown Sedalia. As you can see here, that actually was an 1860s picture that we see there. Where are you going to stay? Well, we have the largest campground on the Missouri State Fairground. You can bring your camper. You can pitch a tent. Harry Truman always stayed at the Bothwell Hotel. It's supposedly one of the most haunted hotels in the country. We have different bed and breakfast, your standard hotel chains, Comfort Inn, the different ones you can pick. If you stay on the fairground, you'll be on the site of the Ozark Music Festival, probably the largest, most raucous, sex, drugs, rock and roll festival in the history of rock and rolls in the 60s and 70s. Every band that was anything was there at that time. completely took over the town. Now, if you were there, and some of you are old enough to have been there, you may not remember it, number one. And if you do remember, you may not want to admit it. But that was the Ozark Music Festival, a part of rock and roll history. The conference will actually be at the State Fair campus. This is the campus. They have a conference center there in the middle. Also is the Daum Museum of Contemporary Art. And so it's about a 2-minute walk right on the campus. And that's where we'll be holding our conference. And people coming far enough wanted to make it worth their while. So we'll start at 1 o'clock on Thursday. We have a full tour bus ready to take people around town, starting at the Starline Brass Trails in Plaza. We'll go down to the Katy Depot, take a tour of some historic murals down at the courthouse, and then go out to Bill Smith Longhorn Ranch. He's about 20 minutes north of town, and stop by probably won't get off on every stop at the Maple Leaf Saloon, where Scott Joplin played, at the different libraries. And then that night at 7 o'clock at night at the Liberty Center for the Arts. It's been around since 1920s, different education, different entertainment. But Jeff Davidson, our own Ron Wilson, 3 Trails West, the Diamond W Wranglers. We're going to have a get down in Cowtown. Entering William Westfall, we're playing some ragtime music. We'll have a little break intermission. He'll be playing there as well. So the tickets for that night are sold separately. So if somebody's coming just for the concert, they can. Hopefully they'll come for both of the events. And so those are available. I'll have the listing a little bit later, but also available through the website. And then the conference is actually at the State Fair Community College, at Conference Center. And Mark Gardner, I kind of let him pick his own topics because he knows this group. He knows Western history. He's both a performer and a historian. So Jack Thorpe, the first book of Cowboys. Ron Wilson will give us an update. A Western Trails overview. We're mainly the Shawnee Trail focusing this time. But we're going to have all the trails have, a 15-minute or so all the trails get represented, because hopefully there'll be people from communities that don't really understand the whole process of what we're working on. So that gives them a chance to learn about all the different ones. William Scott is a history professor at Texas Tech. He did his thesis on the cattle trails of the West, talking about Vaquero history. And then at lunch, Enid, Oklahoma will present next year's plan for for the next meeting next year. There'll be a element of the train. We're Train Town, USA, and you say, well, we're cattle group. Why are we talking about trains? Well, the majority of the cattle drives were going to the railhead. Now, some went to Indian reservations, some went to military posts, but most of them made their way onto trains. And since we are Missouri Pacific and the MKT center of where they had all their shops, we'll chat a little bit about the train folks too. Saturday, William Scott's going to talk about the different drovers, not just about the vaqueros, about the blacks, Indians, women often dressed as men on the cattle drives. Mark Gardner talking about law enforcement in the West, a little bit about the rail development. Cody Aspen is a high school teacher. He's written several good Western books about cattle drives, about engaging a new generation in the Western history. Also have a little time for the open mic. Afterward, for those that didn't get to see the Trails End Plaza, we'll do a tour there. You'll be able to get up on the plaza. We'll be able to get inside the drover's caboose. Mainly, we won't have enough time on the first tour. We're making a lot of stops, but afterward, we'll have enough time, and we'll have a cow chip throwing contest. So warm up. I know a lot of you have plenty of ammunition to play with out there to get ready for the cow chip throwing. And Ron's not going to be there. So if it was, I'd bet on Ron if he was going to be there, but he's got some other plans along the way. And some people do wonder about, what are we doing about cow chips? Well, the Buffalo Soldiers told the early settlers, if you're going to survive in the winter, there's no trees, you have to go collect cow chips. So out they went collecting cow chips to heat, to cook, to brand with. They're basically processed grass. So I've been running the Missouri State Cow Chip competition for several years. And sometimes I even put a few cow patties out by the statue just to see if anybody's paying attention. So warm up, and you two could be a champion. This is a painting of the Texas or the Oklahoma gold rush or land rush. And it's a pretty wild time. The cannon went off, everybody tore out. And if you look closely on the canopy of that Conestoga wagon, you'll see Sedalia or bust. Now, you may say, I want to make it today. I don't want to get busted. We sure hope you get here. I'm rooting for the guy on the high wheel bike because I ride an 1880 penny farthing bicycle. It's almost as dangerous as a horse sometimes, but I'm rooting for the guy to get his land spot out there. And overall, we'd like to present and maintain the Cowboys Code of the West. I think we could use a little bit more of that these days. Speaking about integrity, loyalty, self-reliance, respect for the land and others, living each day with courage and taking pride in your work, finishing the job, being tough but being fair, keeping your promises, talking less but saying more, riding for the brand, and learning not everything is for sale. And so the first, historiccattletrails.com, is the consortium website. So there you can get an agenda, you can buy tickets, which is $75, and that includes the lunches, includes the heavy hors d'oeuvres on Friday night for the cow or the artist, Western artist reception. Also the bus ride, it includes that as well. The only thing it doesn't include would be the Thursday night event. For the Thursday night, get down and cowtoying, the box office at Liberty Center, Sedalia.com. Also, if you go to the Historic Cattle Trails website, you can get a link that will go directly to their box office. So that's kind of an overview of what to expect coming to Sedalia, what we have planned, the agenda. We have some great speakers coming in. We have some great entertainers coming in. And we sure hope to see you all in Sedalia.
Thank you, Doug. That was a terrific overview. Let me give you a virtual round of applause here. Really appreciate it. The images of the Starline Trails in Plaza just are striking. And I think I maybe saw that there's an Indian sculpture as well as the cowboy on horseback herding the cattle, then the trains. So the drover's car, was that where the cowboys rode?
Yeah, actually, let me go back to that. So there were very few drovers' cabooses. Basically, the horses were in the big door that you see toward the right. And so there was some cowboys and the railroad men. So they would stop, unload the horses, move the cattle to different pens, put them back in the car. To start off with, they could only go about 20 miles and they'd have to get more wood and water. And Sedalia was a whistle stop, like many towns in the West that got started when the trains came through. Longhorns, you could get maybe a dozen because of their horns. Probably other breeds, you could probably get 25 or 30 cattle, but you were probably limited longhorn wise to about 15 for a cattle car like that.
Interesting. And that is a Native American Indian image to the right. Is that
this correct? One? So let's see. Mine's cut off here a little bit. Let me move that over if I can. So that was added later. 1866 was a big year in the West. The Indians became official scouts of the U.S. Army and also scouting for other groups. And the Buffalo Soldiers were formed in 1866. It was also the first cattle drive heading north up the Shawnee Trail. So it was a very dynamic year. And of course, the land was the Indians first. We had Osage primarily here. We had Oto, Illini, Missouri Indians. Of course, the Cherokee came through on the Trail of Tears. And of course, 1866, they were official scouts. However, Indians have been used as scouts since the 1600s. They knew the ways through the mountains. They knew the hiding places. They knew the watering holes. They knew the weather patterns. They knew the friendly tribes, the unfriendly tribes. So they've actually been guides for all the Europeans that came through since they landed.
Comment in the chat from Michael Grauer, the drover's car was called a bunk car. So VIP accommodations, I'm sure, for
I say it's the first RV in America. You'll see it if you stay and go through it. It had a little toilet that went down to the tracks. It had a little cooking stove, a special stove, so it didn't burn it down. It had two bunks in it. It had a place for the railroad clerk to keep track of everything. So it really, it's very efficiently built, and it was really the first RV in America. The
That's huge.
statues are about 30% larger than life because outdoor art has to be a little bit bigger to look appropriate. So these statues will be around for about 10,000 years. And so any questions after that, give me a call.
Make a note.
You can tell this was a wood burner, but it has a funnel stack on the locomotive. So, and when they were burning wood, they had pieces of, splint thing that fire off and start prairie fires. And so that's a cinder catcher. When you see an old locomotive with a big funnel stack, it's a cinder catcher. They didn't realize that coal burned 8 times more BTU. So eventually they all burned coal and they had a straight stack. But this is a cinder catcher for the wood burner.
Interesting.
It was a 440. You named locomotives by the wheel number. So 440 means 2 front wheels, 2 drive wheels, no back wheels, which is, I'll show you when we'd go on tour, but a Lincoln funeral train was the same thing. It was a 440. Most of the trains back then were small and they were like this. I'll also show you that there's all these cars have a different gauge, a different width of wheel. Now they're all 4 foot 8.5, but back then some of them were 6 feet, some of them were 2.5 feet. And so it wasn't until about 1880 that they go, what are we doing? Let's make all the rail tracks 4 foot 8.5 so they can roll from one train to the next and not have to figure out which gauge of railroad is going in which direction. So it's more of I'd like to say it's an educational piece, but when I found all these cars, those are the only one I can find. There's not many locomotives or many of these old cars left around. So I kind of took what I could find.
Oh, that's fascinating. What a nightmare that would be, having different gauge tracks everywhere you turned.
And Europe used to do it too. Every country had a different gauge. That way, if they declared war, they couldn't just roll in on the train. Back in the old days, you'd have to stop at every country, get off, get on a new train because the trains didn't go. They had a different gauge. That was for different purposes, but I'm sure they settled it out. We didn't do it till about 1880, get all the trains the same gauge. And the windmill is pretty important. When people moved west, they had to be by a spring or water for themselves or for livestock. Then the American windmill, which is this one from the Arrow motor, then you could go anywhere you wanted, build a ranch, build a railroad. At one point, there were over 300 companies making 1 million windmills a year. And of course, then in 1920s, the American Electrification Act came along and people got electricity, but it's still a great symbol of the West to have the windmill and the sunset behind the windmill going, and they're still very functional. I've got 2 on our place. You got to love windmills if you like the West.
Absolutely. There's a reference in the chat to a windmill museum in Lubbock, Texas. So there's even a museum dedicated to windmills.
There is one outside of Colorado Springs that's fantastic. It has the old big looked like a wind catcher, but happened on it heading to Colorado Springs accidentally, got lost, I guess. But they have probably 30 of the really old windmills. This is a 10-footer. Some of them on the railroad were 20 foot long. Because you couldn't have steam without water, couldn't have water without a water tank, couldn't have a water tank without a windmill. And so it all went together.
Wow. So the Shawnee Trail, the name, Shawnee Indians?
Yeah, there was a Shawnee settlement not far from the trail down in Texas, and they think that's where the name came from. It went near that Shawnee village, and they believe, from all I know, that that's where the name came from. Of course, they also call it the Texas Trail. On all the Rawhide shows, they call it the Sedalia Trail. So it's kind of like, probably different areas for different names. If you were in Texas, they probably call it the Texas Trail, most likely. When it got closer up here, they called it the Sedalia Trail.
It was called the Texas Road as an immigrant trail going south. So it was human foot traffic going south.
Oh, very good. There you go.
And I was really interested in what you had to say about the the fact that the Indians were using that route, and then the Mexican-American War was a time when soldiers were going south along the Texas road. So there was that kind of traffic going on before cattle became a predominant part of the shipping
I think it
along
was
that
one
route.
of the probably the best two-way trail out there if you look farther back in the history of it. What it was not a buffalo trace. The buffalo roamed from the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachians, from Canada to Mexico. So they were great roamers and they were great navigators. They almost found always the best way to get there. And so later travelers did it. Now there's highways that follow. So this is not a buffalo trace, but interesting how, the buffalo had some internal GPS of getting from one place to the other. They were kind of the first, pasture rotators. They'd move on and move one place to the next and basically find the best way to get there.
Well, if there were indeed, 50 million head of buffalo, as we're told, they had to find grass and water, so they had to be moving. And you're right. Now ranchers are practicing rotational grazing and paddocks and so forth to, in a way, emulates that natural process.
I saw a video the other day. A guy uses 1 acre and he moves them every 12 hours, and
Oh
then he
my!
mows it. And I'm probably not up to that, but it's certainly a good idea for pasture maintenance.
I'm way too lazy for that one.
I thought he was talking about Dennis Katzenmeyer. That's how Dennis.
Other comments or questions for Doug? Okay, there's a link to the American Windmill Museum in the chat.
Yeah, this is Steve. What's the story about Baxter Springs, Kansas, and the Shawnee Trail that ties into Sedalia?
So that it came up to Baxter Springs, and that's about where it could take off to an east and west branch. And so the kind of the east came up to Sedalia, but like I said, some went to St. Louis, some went to Iowa, some went to Westport, which is up by Kansas City. And so it depends on the who was buying cattle, where the grass was. Is there some group that don't want to have the Texas fever that drive you over to a different direction? Are there Indians attacking, renegades attacking? So probably the trail boss had a lot of decisions he had to make on the fly as to where they were going to end up.
And bushwhackers and jayhawkers would kill you and steal your cattle too.
Yes, they would.
As far as the southern part of the trail, the Texas side, David Smith from Waxahachie, Texas, is kind of an amateur historian like me, I guess, and a cowboy poet. And he is planning on being at the conference in Sedalia, and is going to share some about the southern end, where the Shawnee Trail came through prominent communities in East Texas.
The one thing I might have to apologize for, all the entertainers, I believe, on Thursday night are from Kansas. Now, that's a lot of Jayhawkers. So I have to apologize for that, but, it is what it is.
That's where the talent's at.
Without Kansas, there's no cattle trade.
Hey, I'm Douglas. Thank you so much for putting on this. This is interesting. I'm really looking forward to your conference at the conference there in Sedalia. It's I don't think I've ever explored Sedalia before.
Come on down.
I already got my stuff already.
Right, that sounds great. We look forward to seeing everybody there.
It's going to be a terrific conference, and that concert really is going to be terrific. Regardless of where the entertainers are coming from, Three Trails West and the Prairie Rose Wranglers are absolutely top of the line entertainers. And you want to hear Jeff Davidson's version of the Rawhide theme song. Might be a step or two above Doug Kiburz even, but
I have to admit, I went to KU for orthopedic surgery, so I've got some Jayhawk in me.
Hey, Ron, you called us the Prairie Rose Wranglers. We've been the Diamond W Wranglers now.
I apologize.
all right.
And I know better, Oren. The Diamond W Wranglers will be there, and they're terrific musicians, and they'll be part of a great show. But that is Thursday night, that October 22. That is a separate ticket, and we encourage you to go to historiccattletrails.com and get your conference tickets, as well as follow the link to the Thursday night concert.
I have a question about Amtrak coming through. Is it the real train or is it a connecting bus?
Oh, it's a real train. It goes from Kansas City to St. Louis twice a day.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Nobody's admitting they went to the Ozark Music Festival here. So if you look up Ozark Music Festival, you'll see some pretty raucous descriptions of it. But that was the era. That was the 70s.
I think I saw your picture there in the middle of that crowd, right in the very center, Doug.
You had more hair.
We all did.
I just have a real quick question. Is it just a conference rule, or is it truly against the law to wear lavender in Sedalia?
Haven't heard that one. I think anything goes.
I'm pretty sure I checked the city offices, and that's what it says. So.
Well, royal purple's another alternative. Any other comments or questions for Doug? Doug, thanks for a terrific presentation. We are excited to be in Sedalia. It's going to be terrific to see the many attractions there. The tours on Thursday, that's all included in your
Right.
conference ticket, in addition to the speakers, the meals, the artist reception Friday night. So we encourage you to go ahead, and lodging options. That information is also on the historiccattletrails.com website. Just click on the conference tab, and that'll take you to all the information you need. So thank you, Doug. We're looking forward. Lonnie, our next Cattle Trails showcase would be on September 11. What do we have coming up?
Well, we have an esteemed speaker lined up. We have our own Cowboy Mike, also known as Michael Grauer, is going to present, and might help me out here if I'm wrong on this, Michael, the art of the cattle trail.
Yep. That's what we talked about this morning. Yeah. I'm just a stand-in.
Forgotten more about cattle trails than I know, so I'm happy to have you here.
Well, I noticed
here
in your list of the conference that I'm not on there anymore. I guess I'm off the hook. So,
it's on there. I've been making some additions when we had one kind of drop out from illness, and we added Frank on, and we added actually. There's I think it's the Flying Diamond Ranch, Longhorn Ranch out in Colorado. Has anybody heard of that? So they're a couple, they're probably in their 80s here, but they raise Longhorns forever. And Mr. Lewis, Glenn Lewis, he drove several Longhorn cattle drives, some of them up to Montana. So they'll be presenting with Bill Smith when they're talking about raising Longhorns. I thought somebody might have heard of their ranch out there. Flying Diamond.
I'm glad to give up my spot.
Nope, you got your spot. But we're still tweaking and kind of adding and subtracting. But you're right where you were before.
Yeah, last time I saw you were on the agenda. We're counting on you, Michael. I did put in the chat, there's the link, but it's very simple, historiccattletrails.com. Go to that site and click on the conference tab, and you'll find all the info you need. And so it'll be Michael Grauer speaking on the art of the cattle drives, art of the cattle trails next month. So join us on September 11th. With that, until next time, this is Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate, saying thanks for taking time to join us in this place, and come on back next month for our Cattle Trails Showcase. Happy trails.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Happy trails all.
Yes, sir.